do a couple things on here, Kelsey, just for you to know. One, we highlight For Aurora all the time. We talk about For Aurora Marketplace that we used to do once a month. Now we do once a week. Deb is watching. So Deb, if there's like a specific thing this week you want people to do, or there's a specific item you want people to drop off at church, if you're low on it, just let us know and we'll plug that. And then Thursday, I saw, actually, did you see this on his social media? Dan Jacobs from 104.3 The Fan is a part of our church and kind of leads the kitchen team a lot. He's making brisket this week.
I saw that.
Unreal. It's crazy. So anyway, there we go. Debbie would like cereals, please. So if you want to help out this week, I think she just means cereal, but just various types of cereal, just boxes of cereal. Bring that. That would be awesome. So thank you very, very much. And then I got a feeling with Kelsey this week, we're going to be using this alert a little bit. Be ready with the button. We'll go from there. Cool. All right. Let's see. Dom said, I volunteer to get Deb a pizza from the pizza place near the Vatican. Hey, look at that. There you go, Deb. I'm not sure that it would hold up very well. Like, I feel like one of those, you got to be there things. So anyway, awesome. Well, Kelsey, would you mind, as we get started, just praying for us?
Yeah, absolutely. God, I just thank you for mornings and the fact that they represent new things each day, that we get to come to you with a fresh start. And sometimes we need that. And so right now, God, will you just give us that moment of just peace, of clarity, and of just a clear vision of who you are. God, today, as we begin to dive into Colossians, would you teach us something new? Would you open both our hearts and our minds to experience a fuller picture of you? God, we thank you for who you are, and we ask that you just bless Lisa on her trip as well. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. All right, so we are going to be jumping into Colossians. As I mentioned already, today is more of an introductory day, and so we're going to spend some time looking at the context to kind of build the foundation for the next several weeks of study. So just want to make sure you know that's coming. We'll be in Colossians for about a month. So just so you know. Good morning, Josh. Good to see you. And this will help get you ready for that study. If you're new to Daily Time with God, maybe you're joining because I talked about it this weekend. Maybe you're joining because I have a celebrity on here in Kelsey, and you're like, I don't totally know how all this works. Really, we want Daily Time with God not to just be something you do with us for an hour, but hopefully this is a way that the rest of your day can have your connection to God be a focal point, be something that centers you. And if Bible study is a new concept to you, or prayer is a new concept to you, this document, which is linked in the post where you found this, has a link to a series we did on Bible study and to a message series we did on prayer. So you can go learn more about either one of those things. And there's also a link to our YouTube page, which has all the things we've already done ready for you to go. I think on Friday, it's going to be our 100th episode, which is insane. So if you guys have any ideas about what we should do for episode 100, let us know. So
how did I end up on the 100th episode? I feel like I'm stealing the moment.
Josh said that he's only on here because of you. So see that? Boom. I mean, the people demanded it. The people demanded it. All right. So the Book of Colossians, I've included this little link right here to a Bible Project video where they give kind of a great 10-minute heads up, kind of just bullet points of Colossians. So you can go check that out at your leisure. But we're going to take a minute and break down these 5 different areas: author, recipient, who it was being written to, occasion or circumstances of writing, the structure of it, and then the major themes we find inside of it. If you're reading a study Bible, my guess is you have some of these answers. And so if you want to, just drop in some of the answers into the chat, and we'll include yours as we talk about each one. And then we're going to spend just a couple minutes with that knowledge studying the first couple verses. And then we'll talk about, if you can believe it, some specific application, and then some prayer requests. I see that Greg just joined us. Good to see you, Greg. Glad you're here. And we're praying for Greg's friend Pete, who Greg told me this weekend just got put into hospice. So we're praying for him as he battles and hopefully finds Jesus in the middle of it. So, all right. So let's start with the author. We are in the Book of Colossians. Who wrote the Book of Colossians, Kelsey?
That would be Paul.
Nice.
Most would assume it's Paul. It sounds like Paul. It's got a lot of Paul writings in it. It's very Paul.
Yeah, and I think for somebody that doesn't know who Paul is, maybe just give us a quick synopsis of who is Paul.
Man. You're asking me to give a lot of information in a short time. I can do this. Okay. Paul was a person who didn't love Jesus. In fact, thought Jesus was going against what God was doing. And so when Jesus kind of introduced himself to Paul in this crazy moment where he was blinded by him and heard his voice and was like, dude, what are you doing? We're actually on the same team. Like, let's work together. Paul kind of had this revelation that, oh, the people I've been fighting are the ones I'm supposed to fight for. And so throughout his ministry, he moved from being someone who hated Christians to being, well, a Christian that wasn't just for revamping the Jewish community, but was actually for all people, and kind of opened the door to introduce non-Jewish people to Jesus, which is maybe my favorite thing about him, is that he was able, this has become one of my favorite words during COVID season, but he was able to pivot so far from who he was to who God needed him to be. Was that too much? Did I nerd alert?
Let's go. That was awesome. I mean, everybody's gonna be like, why don't you just, Phil, you just take notes, just like Kelsey. That's what they're gonna start thinking, and I'm fine with it. It's great. Excellent. Let's see here. Oh, by the way, Buffy said, Kels, just FYI, Phil makes his partner do all the hard work while he asks all the questions. So you'll have earned your spot on the 100th episode. I mean, I would say that's kind of how good hosts always do it. If you watch, it's like, here's a volleyball. You just go hit it. And Kelsey's great. Lisa, I want to set them up to be successful. So Peggy said, Paul is the author. Shocker, right? Yep. And we're going to talk about the occasion of how it was written, or to what it was written. The occasion for Paul is that he's in prison. So if you're like, goodness gracious, this dude spends a lot of time in prison. Well, he does. It's also that it's kind of like the free time he had available. So what's he going to do in prison? He's going to tell prison guards about Jesus and get them to become Christians. Does that a lot. And other prisoners, and he's going to write letters to churches. So that was like, he wasn't like in the yard working on his guns. He was doing those two things. So, all right. So that's Paul. That's who wrote it. There's really no historic dispute that it's his work. Who is he writing to? To whom is he writing?
That would be, okay. So I learned it wrong growing up. I thought it was the church in Colossae. But this weekend you said the church in Colossae. So I'm now learning with you. And then I went and Googled it, and it is Colossae. So I just learned it all wrong. But church in Colossae, which he did not start, which I find interesting. He, in fact, most people believe he had not actually been there and not actually spent time with them. So that was pretty fascinating that he was like, I care about the person who started you guys, and I'm hearing some things, so I'm going to reach out and kind of extend a hand. Which is pretty fun.
Which is crazy, right? Because for a lot of the writings that we see from Paul, there is this really unique relationship that Paul has, whether it's with Timothy or it's with a specific church or it's with an individual recipient. And you hear this kind of heartbeat come out. But the thing that's different, right, is instead of having a relationship with Colossae, the specific church, he had a relationship with the church planter, right? And so the church planter for Colossae is a guy named Epaphras, which you could also say is kind of the recipient, like sorta. And so Epaphras, who had been a co-worker with Paul, had grown up in Colossae and planted the church. And so Epaphras had spent time with Paul and basically communicated what was going on at his church. And Paul, I think we get to see this cool thing where Paul is extending love and compassion to Colossae because of his credibility and love for Epaphras. So different, very different than many of the letters that we read from Paul when he's writing to these churches that he either helped start or knows them personally. Here, it's like kind of by extension through Epaphras that he's writing this letter. So, cool.
Well, and it's also crazy because like Colossae is like this tiny little town, like it's a nothing town. So like it really is genuinely Paul's relationship that kind of carries over into it, because like Laodicea is right next door, and Laodicea is like one of the biggest cities in all the area, and he's not writing to them. He's writing to someone that he has a connection to. It's kind of sweet. I think Paul's kind of sweet. I don't know if that's a weird thing to say, but
Kind of sweet. He's kind of sweet. I agree. He's kind of sweet. I mean, unless he's talking to Judaizers, then he's not as sweet. But
that's fair.
Followers of Jesus, he's a nice guy. Cassie said, recipient is the church at Colossae, a city in Asia Minor. So if we think about, yeah, she's right, the like specific region of where we're talking about present day, think Asia Minor. Colossae is a city within there. And we talked about this this weekend. Colossae is a part of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, which peaked in the 2nd century, was already at this point like still kind of on the very significant upswing. Doing incredibly well. When we think the percentage I used this weekend, when we think about world population, the Roman Empire at its peak was between 20 and 25% of the world's population. And so all the things that flowed from that, all the culture that flowed from that, all the economic power that flowed from that. By contrast, the United States is about 4.5% of the global population. So we think, wow, we're a global superpower, and we are. Now think like, okay, what would this be like if it was 4 or 5 times our size, like in terms of population density? That would be Rome. So pretty crazy. And then Peggy said, occasion the church had elements of other beliefs sneaking in. Look at that. Peggy with the dime right there. That's good. What else, when we think about occasion, how might you flesh that out from Peggy's thoughts here?
Oh man. So this is the one that I knew this was coming. There's a million thoughts. So you're going to have to help condense my thoughts. The big one was there were different ways of understanding how Christianity fit into people's lives, right? So there were people that had tons of gods that they worshiped. Well, they just added Jesus to it. And then there were people that were devout Jewish people, kind of like Paul was, trying to add in some Jewish beliefs that weren't necessary anymore within their structure. There was, I can't say this word very well, asceticism. Is that how you say that? The idea that if I kind of keep myself suppressed, if I control the physical, then I'll reach a new level of spiritual, which turns out is not true. So there was just a lot of how can I, instead of how can Jesus. And so the really big hope, I'm getting into major themes now too, but the really big hope for Paul was a high Christology, or the idea that Jesus is the only answer to all of this.
That's good.
Was that a fair way of putting it? That was a lot of information at one time.
No, it's great. And I think I captured most of it. And folks are helping us here too. Greg said a city that is pretty immoral, as I recall. Really within Rome, you had this like huge challenge, right? Because a little bit like the United States, there was so much freedom that existed, and that freedom some people used for good and some people used for really bad. And it was really hard sometimes to be able to tell the difference. Sound familiar? And so Paul was trying to help this early church understand how important it was and how tricky it would be if they believed the wrong stuff. Libby said Paul's purpose in writing this letter is to refute Colossian heresy, right? There's this false teaching. It's one thing like if a person believes it, right? Like you don't want that to happen, but it's different when it starts to work its way. If all of a sudden, like at Eastern Hills, it was like, oh, they're starting to teach whatever it is, like say take asceticism, and they're like, oh, we're going to do that, or we're going to take this thing from Eastern thought and we're going to incorporate it in because it seems like a good idea. The bigger category of what we would call all of this today is syncretism. So it's not so much that you're going, Jesus isn't God, or that he's not the only way to heaven. It's just like, it's like a theological buffet. Like I'm just going to go take a little bit from everybody that seems fun. This person seems really nice. This person seems really sincere. I love how this person prays. And so it doesn't matter all the things that undergird any of that. I'm just going to take all of it and apply it to my own faith. And Paul's like, whoa, let's be careful. Like there is impact to those decisions. So, and Cassie said, to add to the Peggy's post, they're trying to combine paganism, this idea of people pursuing anything but God, and secular philosophy into faith. That is absolutely what's true about that. And then Leslie said, my Bible says that Greek mystery religions and mysticism was also threatening the laws and customs. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I think mysticism is hard to pin down because a little bit like what we see Jesus talking about in terms of idolatry and all these false idols, it felt like And I mean, I would say we see this today. You think about people that are like, I'm not really Christian, but I'm spiritual. And what does that mean? It means whatever the crap they want it to mean. And that's part of the challenge, because you're like, it could mean something different tomorrow to the same person as it does today. And so Paul's like, no. Truth matters. Information matters. There are things that are correct and things that are incorrect. And there are ways that we can correctly pursue God. And there are ways that, well, we think maybe we're pursuing God. It's actually creating distance in our connection to God when we do it the wrong way. So super great job, guys. Crushed that. Wait, see, between Kelsey and you guys, I don't even have to do anything.
I don't feel like either of us need to be here. I feel like we can just pose the question.
They got it. Welcome, Kelsey.
This is fun.
So we got structure now. When we think about structure of the letter, maybe just give us kind of a high level breakdown. We got 4 chapters. How can we think about the structure of Colossians?
Oof. This one's hard for me. So it's a Pauline letter. So Pauline is Paul's work. And Paul always has kind of a similar structure, except he diverges from that occasionally. And this one, he's pretty true to form because he doesn't know them super well. So he's not addressing particular needs or particular issues. So keeps kind of the structure of like this. I could go as far in depth as we want or not at all, but like this introduction. Then he goes into praying over them. This section of Thanksgiving. Oh goodness, I'm pulling out some old thought processes. Then it begins to teach. If there is a need for a rebuke, sometimes that's where a rebuke sits. We see that more in Galatians, where Paul was pretty angry. This one, he's not as angry, so it's not as necessary. Again, he doesn't actually know them very well, so he's helping rather than confronting, which is helpful. And then usually there's that ending. I don't really know what the correct term for that is, but kind of the final greetings to people and, hey, I see you, I hear you, I remember that you're there. In this particular book, he talks to Onesimus, which is one of my favorite humans ever. So I enjoyed that. Well, look at you adding some context to these.
No, I got you. Onesimus is an interesting dude too, because if you know the book of Philemon near the end of your New Testament, it's the same dude. And so he is essentially a slave, and he has escaped. And so you see some of that story get sprinkled into the book of Colossians, and then you see a more direct conversation in the book of Philemon, which is, I mean, it's great. Like we're reading real letters from real people to other real people from thousands of years ago. Crazy. And as countercultural as you could possibly imagine. So, I would say if you want like just some kind of quick breakdown stuff of the letter, one of the things that's really helpful about Colossians, in my opinion, is the way that Paul thinks about and understands how he suffers. And some of this is from that video that I sent you guys, like some of the breakdown stuff. But he will talk about how, even though I think for Paul, there was always this feeling of, how could I have possibly not gotten this sooner? How could I have possibly not figured this out sooner? And with that in mind, you know, he's looking back to